page 1 of 724. Evolution 4, Douglas Futuyma, 2017. Unit 1. An idea that changes the world. Chapter 1. Evolutionary biology. 1.1 Antibiotic resistance. This pink nudibranch, Hypselodoris bullocki, is a spectacular example of a group of marine mollusks renowned for their unusual shapes and bright coloration. Many nudibranchs contain toxins as a defense against predation, and their unusual colors may be an adaptation that warns potential predators not to eat them. The only scientific explanation of such adaptations is the theory of evolution by natural selection. In February 2014, in the West Africa country Sierra Leone, the first cases were reported of the horrifying disease caused by Ebola virus. It rapidly spread to Liberia and Guinea, and within 15 months it had stricken more than 26,000 people and killed more than 11,000. Among the first questions epidemiologists ask about a new or resurgent infectious disease are where it originated and by what paths it spread. Within 7 months after the start of the Ebola outbreak, a team of health scientists, molecular biologists, and evolutionary biologists had an answer: 7. Based on an evolutionary analysis of the viral genomes from several patients, the researchers concluded that the West Africa virus had almost certainly spread from Central Africa about a decade earlier, and that the 2014 outbreak originated from a single person who contracted the virus from another host species, probably a bat. This was an important point, because it indicated that although the virus is readily transmitted from one person to another, it is only rarely contracted by humans from other species. This was by no means the first time evolutionary methods had been used to trace the origin of an infectious disease. This approach has been routine ever since the origin of the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, which causes AIDS, was determined in 1989. Two distinct HIVs, HIV-1 and HIV-2, infect humans. The pandemic is caused by HIV-1. Both HIVs are lentiviruses, a group of retroviruses that infect diverse mammals. In monkeys and other primates, the viruses are called simian immunodeficiency viruses, or SIVs, figure 1.1. An evolutionary analysis showed that HIV-2 recently evolved from and simian immunodeficiency viruses carried by sooty chimpanzees, figure 1.2, 9, 25. The evolutionary analysis showed, moreover, that HIV-1 entered the human population near the beginning of the 20th century, decades before it spread beyond Africa. It is thought that humans became infected with SIVs by contact with the blood of chimpanzees and mangabas that they killed for food. These viruses do not have a fossil record, so how could biologists infer their evolution and spread? They use methods that have been developed to reconstruct evolutionary history, and that are based on understanding the processes of evolutionary change. Understanding the processes of evolution is highly relevant to human health. For example, the first drug approved to treat HIV-infected people was AZT, in 1987. Zidovudine, ZDV, also known as azithromycin, AZT, was the first antiretroviral medication used to prevent and treat HIV/AIDS. It is generally recommended for use in combination with other antiretrovirals. It may be used to prevent mother-to-child spread during birth or after a needle stick injury or other potential exposure. It is sold both by itself and together as lamivudine, zidovudine and abacavir/lamivudine/zidovudine. It can be used by mouth or by slow injection into a vein. Common side effects include headaches, fever, and nausea. Serious side effects include liver problems, muscle damage, and high blood lactate levels. It is commonly used in pregnancy and appears to be safe for the fetus. ZDV is of the nucleoside analog reverse transcriptase inhibitor, NRTI, class. It works by inhibiting the enzyme reverse transcriptase that HIV uses to make DNA and therefore decreases replication of the virus. Zidovudine was first described in 1964. It was resynthesized from a public domain formula by Burroughs Wellcome. It was approved in the United States in 1987 and was the first treatment for HIV. It is on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. It is available as a generic medication. Within a few years, however, AZT failed to prevent many infected patients from developing AIDS, and it has been necessary to develop other drugs. What happened? Populations of HIV had adapted to AZT by evolving resistance. Ever since the first antibiotic or penicillin came into use, bacteria and other pathogenic microbes have rapidly evolved resistance to every antibiotic that has been widely used. Figure 1.3, 2022. Staphylococcus aureus, a bacterium that causes many infections in surgical patients, has evolved resistance to a vast array of antibiotics, starting with penicillin and working its way through many others. Drug-resistant strains of Neisseria gonorrhoeae, the bacterium that causes gonorrhea, have steadily increased in abundance, and many strains of the tuberculosis, pneumonia, and cholera bacteria are highly resistant to antibiotics. Throughout the tropics, the microorganism that causes malaria is now resistant to chloroquine and is becoming resistant to other drugs as well. Worldwide, more than 500,000 people die yearly from drug-resistant infections. The evolution of antibiotic resistance is a major crisis in public health. 3.22. Almost every hospital in the world treats casualties in this battle against changing opponents, but as the use of antibiotics increases, so does the incidence of bacteria that are resistant to those antibiotics. Thus any gains made are almost as quickly lost. See Figure 1.3. Why is this happening? Do the drugs cause drug-resistant mutations in their bacteria's genes? Do the mutations occur even without exposure to drugs, that is, are they present in unexposed bacterial populations? Do the mutations spread among different species of bacteria? Can the evolution of resistance be prevented by using lower doses of drugs? Higher doses? Combinations of different drugs? Microbial adaptation to drugs is the same, in principle, as the countless adaptations of every species to its environment, so it is very familiar to evolutionary biologists. The principles and methods of evolutionary biology have provided some answers to these questions about antibiotic resistance, and have shed light on many other problems that affect society. Evolutionary biologists have studied the evolution of insecticide resistance in disease-carrying and crop-destroying insects. They have helped devise methods of non-chemical pest control and have laid the foundations for transferring genetic resistance to diseases and insects from wild plants to crop plants. Evolutionary principles and knowledge are being used in biotechnology to design new drugs and other useful products, and in medical genetics to identify and analyze inherited diseases as well as variation in susceptibility to infectious diseases. In the fields of computer science and artificial intelligence, evolutionary computation uses principles taken directly from evolutionary theory to solve mathematically difficult practical problems, such as constructing complex timetables and processing radar data. The importance of evolutionary biology goes far beyond its practical uses. An evolutionary framework provides answers to many questions about ourselves. How do we account for human variation, or the fact that almost everyone is genetically and phenotypically unique, What accounts for behavioral differences between men and women? How did exquisitely complex, useful features such as our hands and our eyes come to exist? What about apparently useless or even potentially harmful characteristics such as our wisdom teeth and appendix? Why do we age, senesce, and eventually die? Evolution raises still larger questions. As soon as Darwin published On the Origin of Species in 1859, the evolutionary perspective was perceived to bear on long-standing questions in philosophy. If humans, with all their mental and emotional complexity, originated by natural processes, where do ethics and moral precepts find a foundation and origin? What, if anything, does evolution imply about the meaning and purpose of life? Must one choose between evolution and religious belief? Page 6 of 724.